Welcome to the February 2nd, 2022 council meeting, and today we'll be discussing public works. Cinda, will you do the roll call?
Councilmember Lewis.
Present.
Councilmember Hopkins.
Present.
Councilmember Gordon.
Present.
Councilmember Freilich.
Present.
Councilmember Brockert.
Present.
Councilmember Gendrich.
Present.
Councilmember Osborne.
Present.
7 present, 0 absent, Your Honor.
Thank you. Can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So which one did she say she's going to start with?
Building grounds, 48.
The first item we're going to talk about is building and grounds. Nancy?
And this is
On page 48.
48 in your notebooks in general fund. The revised estimate is $24,900 more than the original budget. There was a $13,700 increase in capital outlay cost, and that's price increases since we did the budget a year ago. 11,500 increase in supply costs, again due to price increases for cleaning and other supplies, and a net 300 decrease in other line items. The increases in capital outlay were actually funded by road use tax, though, so they won't have an impact on the general fund. FY23 budget is actually $59,600 less than the current year budget. Overall decrease is due to the net effect of personal services increased by $15,300, commodities increased by $2,500, contractual services increased by $400, and capital outlay decreased by $77,800. Of the capital outlay allocations for FY23, totals $39,600, and $38,100 will be funded from road use taxes, and that's for an electronic gate at Public Works. In addition to the operating budget for building and grounds, next Tuesday we'll go through some of the capital projects, and that's where our deferred maintenance items will be. So some of that will be next week's discussions. Brian and Stan.
Good evening. Brian Steinman, Public Works Director. This is Stan O'Brien. He is our Building and Grounds Director. So building and grounds are the guys and gals who take care of almost all the city buildings as far as custodial, landscaping, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, you name it. These guys get first shot at trying to repair it, and we do that for a couple of reasons. One is they're very skilled at what they do, but it's also we can realize some cost savings there by not having to hire contractors to come in and work on HVAC or wire up an outlet or unclog a drain, things like that we're able to do in-house. They also supply all of the supplies for city buildings, so like paper towels, toilet paper, light bulbs, you name it. During COVID last year, they had a lot of cleaning supplies, hand sanitizer, Clorox wipes. They come into Public Works, they get inventoried, and then they go back out, and then they get inventoried. So Stan and his crew are responsible for all of that. They do a great job. As I mentioned, they're highly skilled, they're highly trained in multiple disciplines. We have a locksmith on staff, we've got electricians on staff, plumbers. They're the same people, but they have all these skilled trades and training and certifications to back them up. So we try to repair whatever we can first. We get first shot at it, and then if we can't, we'll contract it out, or if we don't have time, or if it's above our scope or things like that. So yeah, you have anything you want to add?
Only that I'm coming off COVID, so that's why I'm wearing the mask. But this is my first day back, so don't have a chance giving it to anybody else, so. Are there any?
All right, you did such a great job. There's no questions. Stan, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Easy.
All right. Next item is Public Works Administration, page 162.
Okay, the Public Works Administration, staff-wise, it's Brian and an allocation of the administrative secretary. On page 162, that pie chart shows kind of all the different departments and divisions that are under the umbrella of the Public Works Administrator. And we didn't have all the final budgets ready in Public Works by the time we printed this. The total budgets for the current year, about 13.8 million, so it's quite an operation with all the different divisions. For the admin revised estimate, it's 1,400 higher than the original budget. Personal services are 2,100 higher due to wage adjustments, and capital outlay is 700 less than the original budget. Next fiscal year, a $5,600 increase, and that's an increase of $8,000 in personal services, a decrease of $3,000 in capital outlay, and a $600 increase in transfers. Brian?
So, as you can see, there's quite a bit that happens in Public Works. I've got a great staff, great supervisors. A lot of them are here tonight, and you'll get to meet them as their items come up. But I like to tell my boss that Public Works are the ones who get things done around the city. We take a lot of pride in that. I think we do a fantastic job, and we'll go through each division in more detail through the budgets. But so the admin is just kind of the overall budget. But I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have of the admin budget.
Any questions?
I've got one.
Yes.
This is, I don't know that you can give me an answer, but I want you to think about it a little bit. We've got a massive inflation right now, and I'm seeing that we're only looking at a 2.4% higher budget. Is there any plans, or what can we do to offset inflation, which I think is running like 7.8 right now? I know it's going to hit you. It's just a matter of time and where and when.
We're already seeing it in a lot of our budgets as far as like equipment costs, material costs. Right now, I don't have a good answer for that. We're just kind of rolling with it like everybody else. Council did allow us to purchase a vehicle, move a vehicle purchase ahead. That's going to help us out. But yeah, we're just going to have to kind of see how things go. I mean, last thing we want to do is cut services, but we may be able to cut back in some other areas, as far as equipment purchases or something like that. But right now, we're trying to hold status quo, and we'll see how it goes.
Are you seeing a lot of parts, replacement parts too?
Oh yeah, everything's up.
Everything?
Yep. And Randy Mueller could talk about that when we get into equipment services. He bears the brunt of that stuff. And a lot of it's not prices so much, it's lead times as well. We used to be able to call for a part and get it in a couple of days. Now sometimes it's a couple of weeks, a couple of months. Things aren't available. So it just depends on what it is and how far away you have to go to get it. So yeah, we're feeling that like everybody else.
You're going to have to be patient like the rest of us.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions?
If I could just add, Brian, could you just talk a minute about asset management and what you're doing with trying to work toward? This is one way we can help mitigate costs of corrective or unknown outages, is if we do good preventive and planned maintenance. And so this is something his team has been working on. So if you could just touch on that.
Sure. We purchased asset management software a couple of years ago, and we're getting better at it. It's kind of new to this part of our organization. We've always had it, but it's been on spreadsheets or notebooks, and we're trying to get all that streamlined into one system. So it's taken some time to get all of our assets identified and then get them entered into the system. But now we're able to track work orders. We're able to track vehicle replacements, parts, inventory, and we're getting better at it every day. What we're trying to get to is to figure out where where we can get ahead of the curve with preventative maintenance. Right now, we're very responsive, like a lot of departments are, to when something breaks, we go fix it. But we're not quite up on,
Will the online people please mute your microphone, please? Thank you. Brian?
Anyway, we're trying to get more towards preventative maintenance and prolong the lives of our equipment and our vehicles by being able to do that. We will get there. We are getting there. But what we're finding is that that list is quite extensive, and we're not able to do both with what we have. We're working towards that. We'll try to get better at that. But that's what we're gearing up towards, is to try to get ahead of these curves, to prolong our lives, to make our assets last longer, have better control over them, and then, that type of thing.
Any other questions? All right, next item is roadway maintenance on page 168. Nancy?
The revised estimate is actually over the original budget by $233,400. And this was what was just approved by council at the last meeting. It includes an increase of $8,500 in personal services, $700 increase in commodities, $38,100 increase in contractual services, and $186,100 in capital outlay. That capital outlay increase was due to adding the dump truck to the revised estimate. It was originally a budget request for next fiscal year, but due to probably the longer lead times if we wait to order it, a few of the dealers had equipment in stock, so it was moved up. Council has already approved that. Next fiscal year, budget is $296,000 higher than the current year original budget. Personal services increased by $27,300. Contractual services increased $3,700, and capital outlay increased by $265,000. The largest ticket item for capital outlay that was requested was a rubber tire end loader for $300,000, and that's in the proposed budget. The primary source of roadway maintenance and the next several budgets are road use taxes. So they're not supported by property taxes. It's actually a transfer in from road use taxes that fund these operations. Brian?
Randy Howell is our roadway maintenance supervisor. He is out sick tonight, so I will be covering for him. Randy's been here for almost 40 years. He did put in the budget to retire this next year, which came as a kind of a surprise, but he'll be sorely missed. But he's been fantastic at what he's done. Takes a lot of pride in his work. He takes a lot of pride in the community. A lifelong resident, and really cares. And I think it really shows how well our roadways and things are maintained. The guys and gals in the roadway maintenance, I call them the street department. They have varying jobs throughout the city depending on the time of year. They'll maintain streets with like patching, seal coating, crack sealing. They'll do snow removal, they do leaf collection. Some of these are separate budget items, but that's the kind of work that they do. And it's never the same day to day. I think that's why they like it. They take a lot of pride in it. They're pretty soft spoken. They don't want a lot of recognition, but we recognize that they do great work. We've changed some performance measures the last couple of years. We do track the miles the streets maintain. We've changed the way we do our pothole patching. Council has allowed us in the past to purchase some new equipment so that we can use hot mix throughout the year, which is a game changer for us in our pothole patching. When you patch with cold mix, it tends to stick for a couple of days and doesn't last very long. What we're able to do with our pothole patching equipment is we've got a hot box, which allows us to keep hot asphalt hot. But we also have a recycler, which allows us to make new asphalt out of our old asphalt by adding emulsion, and basically it's like a giant washing or a dryer, clothes dryer, where it adds heat to it and it stirs it, kind of like a concrete truck, and then you get hot asphalt out. We can use that. We can make a 3 or 4 tons a day, put it in our hot box, take it anywhere we need to go in town to do that. That's been key for us because the asphalt markets have changed. There used to be several suppliers of asphalt in our region, mostly the Quad Cities, and those have all been either bought up and closed down or sold. So right now, the only place we have to get asphalt is in Rock Island. So by the time you get to Rock Island, you get back, it was cold. So now we have the hot box to get it up there and back, but we're also only having one supplier. We're at their mercy of when they're going to make asphalt that meets our spec. So when we do have it, we'll go up there and we'll buy a bunch of it, and we'll put it on the ground, and then we can take that and put it in our reheater and heat it, and then we have basically brand new asphalt to use. So we're measuring that now and are trying to measure our efficiency in our pothole patching. We also have a crack sealing machine that we bought a couple years ago so that we can seal those long cracks, either in asphalt or concrete, to preserve the life of our streets. That's one of the ways we're going to get more bang for our buck, is to keep that life extended out before it comes to a complete repair. And you'll see that in different areas around town. University, we patched a couple years ago, we crack sealed. It's not that old of a street, but if you keep it, put the effort into it and keep it newer, it'll last longer, right, before it gets to the point where you have to replace it. So we're trying to do that a lot with our in-house staff as much as we possibly can. There are some that we contract out. We do have our fold-up patching program and our asphalt overlay program that we'll continue to do. The modified sub-base, the grinding that you'll see in the capital request, that's where we take our removed concrete from projects, and we grind that back into a usable product, and we use it as sub-base for our roadways. That product pays for itself over and over every year. We spend about $75,000, and we get enough to supply our other projects roadway base, like Grandview Avenue, like West Hill sewer separation, some of 2nd Street patching. That's all our old street made into new rock to be the base of our new street, and that's a huge asset for us. We love that program, and we thank you for letting us continue to fund that. So, I think that's pretty much all I have. The capital request, like I said, the big one was the dump truck that we were able to purchase ahead of time. We really appreciate that. The rubber tire end loader is a big expense. We recognize that. The one that we're going to replace, we got the year I graduated high school. So it's 30 years old plus, and it's on its last legs. So that's the reason we're asking for that. We've gotten all we can get out of it, and it's time to replace that one. So that's why it's in there. As far as the trucks go, and the welder, our welder is obsolete. We ran it till we can't get parts for it anymore. So we try to do that when we can, when it makes sense to take that equipment and run it forever. But forever came this year, so now it's time to get some new stuff. So. Any other questions on roadway?
Yeah, Brian, I guess for my clarification, your last comment here, concrete and asphalt grinding, 75,000. And I guess, I'm in favor of all that anyway, but it seems to me like it was like $250,000 that we approved for that. Am I just got my numbers?
I think
when we had the last time we approved that, which, like I say, I'm completely in favor of, was I just have my numbers mixed up, or is that what
I think you do. Yeah, we've been at 75,000 for the last few years. We were at 50 and we upped it to 75,000, but we've never been at 250. No.
Okay. So that pile of reconditioned concrete that I made a special effort to go down and observe, that's a $75,000 expense.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Any other questions? Next item is traffic control operations, page 172. Nancy, please.
This budget includes street striping, the various different street signs, and other traffic control functions. The revised estimate is $2,300 less than the original budget. Personal services are actually under by $7,300 due to staffing changes. That decrease was partially off by an increase in commodities, basically sign materials. Next fiscal year's budget is $31,200 higher than the original FY22 budget. Personal services increased a small amount, $1,400. Capital outlay increased by $29,800. Capital outlay allocation includes replacing 800 20 traffic signs for $16,000, replacing 10 barricades, $2,500, replacing 200 traffic cones, $6,000. And the largest increase is purchasing new snow emergency route signs. And that was discussed at a previous city council meeting. And that estimate for that is $24,500. Brian?
So traffic control is everything from stop signs to street name signs to parking stall T-bars to crosswalks. We try to do as much of that in-house as we can as well to keep our costs down. Interesting note, the price of paint has gone through the roof and the availability of paint is gone down the drain. So we painted a little bit less this year than we normally do because we just couldn't get our hands on the paint. But that's something that we do in-house as well. So we maintain a little over 6,000 signs. They meet a reflectivity requirement by the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So they're usually good for anywhere from 5 to 10 years, sometimes a little bit less, sometimes a little bit more. But we review those on a rotating basis so that we can make all those fresh. So when we order new signs, that's what we're doing. We're replacing the signs that no longer meet the reflectivity standards. Other than that, we have to replace barricades every so often because they'll walk off or they'll get broken or things like that. Same with traffic cones; they tend to disappear, over the year. And then, as we discussed during my presentation earlier, the snow emergency signs that you guys had approved. So, if we want to continue to do that, I need to budget for that in here. So that would come out of this budget. Any questions on that one?
Just a curiosity, what happened with no parking curbs? They go away?
We didn't. Well, I think Randy might have mixed up on that a little bit. We didn't go away. We didn't paint much this year of that because of the painting supply. And we had done it. We don't have to do that every year. Usually that'll last a little bit longer because it's not driven over as much on the curb. I mean, it's not as much. It happens. But yeah, that's why. So it's like every other year type of thing.
And not anticipated for, looks like a couple of more years.
Looks like, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, next item is snow and ice control, page 177. Nancy?
Okay, this budget really varies each year by just the number and severity of winter storms. The revised estimate for this year, it's $15,200 more than the original budget. Personal services are over a small amount, $200. Commodities over by $12,000 due to increased salt cost, and capital outlay is over by $3,000. Next fiscal year, $27,500 estimated increase. It was primarily due to increased capital outlay. Brian took back one of his requests just today. He doesn't need the $21,000 for the 10-foot two-way snowplow, so we'll be taking that out. I guess that was included on that dump truck that we just ordered, so we don't need to buy it separately. We do contract for downtown snow removal costs, and I thought about taking some of the history off on page 177, but that's just shows the wide variation of different winters and how much we had to use the outside contractor for that, and also the number of snow events during each year. So the low in the last basically 20 years was 9 events. The high was 26 in FY14. And this year is not quite over yet, so we're not counting. And we don't want to jinx it. The other thing I always find interesting, Randy Howell, on page 178, under recent accomplishments, he kind of gives a history of last year's winter. And when the winter's over, you tend to forget, but so if you wanted to read through that, our first snowstorm last year was still in October. So I always find that interesting.
So snow and ice is everybody's favorite topic this time of year. So far, so good, I would like to say. We're looking good, as Nancy mentioned. The new truck that we are purchasing has a plow that came with it, so we can take that 21,000 out of the capital request. So far, we're ahead of where we should be for salt usage. Knock on, there's no wood around here. So we'll see how that goes, which hopefully will save us some money next fiscal year if we don't have to buy as much salt. They are changing the way that we purchase salt next year. For years in the past, we had done a consortium purchase with the city of Davenport. So Davenport, Buffalo, Bettendorf, we had one large purchase, and then we would get barges from that. They have gone away from doing that because of the administrative costs, I guess. And so there's a new process that we'll use this year with the DOT. It'll cost us a little bit more per ton, but it will be delivered to our salt storage barn by truck, so we don't have to go down and pick it up, which is what we did in the past. So the trade-off there is we'll have our guys freed up to do more work while the salt's being delivered. So, you know, win some, lose some on that, but I think that'll work out for us. Other than that, I think, you know, snow and ice this year has been pretty good. Like I said, we've only had one major snowfall this year where we had to take snow out of downtown, so that'll hopefully save us some cost. That tends to be expensive if you look at the history there. Other than that, I don't have much more to say. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions?
What's driving the increases in calcium chloride over the next few years?
I don't know what the driver is. I know that the way that we bid it before with the bulk discount with the consortium, saved us some money. With that going away, we anticipate those costs will go up because we won't have that bulk saving for that. Other than that, I think it's just a projection to kind of have some fluff in there to make sure. I don't think there's a supply shortage of salt. Transportation costs may be higher, and there may be some delays there. But other than that, I don't know of any major shift.
Okay. And then one other question. We get a lot of comments about the kind of the pile of snow downtown that is between where the owners will shovel out and then the city crews will push snow through, and then you end up with that 18-inch band.
Yep.
Can you review for me just what the triggers are around when do we actually send equipment downtown to pull that away?
Yeah, it varies per event, obviously, and it varies per weather. If there's a chance that it'll get warm enough to melt that off, we try to let it melt because it saves money, right? Yep. If we know there's another storm coming and we're not going to have room to pile more, we'll go get it sooner rather than later. It's just a matter of balancing out all those factors, where your next storm is, what the temperature is going to be. But if it gets to a point where people have to climb over it, we want to make sure we get it out of there. But we don't want to do it, if we know we have another storm coming, like if we had one Monday, another one's coming Tuesday or Wednesday, usually we can get 2 storms worth in there, so then we don't have to pay for it on Monday and then pay for it again on Tuesday or whatever, you know what I mean, to try to stack them up. We try to be as efficient as we can to keep those costs down, because it's quite expensive for them to go do that downtown operation.
Yeah. Just roughly, what does it cost each time you do that?
The first one this year that we did it was around $20,000.
Okay.
So, and that's usually, it's a per hour rate, but it just depends on how long it takes and how much snow there is, controls that as well, so.
Yeah.
That's all the snow removal contracted services, though, they're responsible for our sidewalks downtown, right?
The property owner is responsible to maintain the sidewalk, to shovel the sidewalk. The city will come, the city plows the street. So like Jeff was saying, you get that happy medium, right, where they can't go any farther and the windrow is there from the plow. So we come back and get that, because we wouldn't expect somebody to try to lift that slushy frozen snow off that area where you're trying to park cars and everything else. That's why we get that downtown. And that's the only area that we do that, is the downtown business district.
Yeah, the owners can totally follow code, do 4 foot of sidewalk or whatever they can, but you gotta put it somewhere, and you can't put it on your neighbors. Can't drag it down to the corner.
And you can't put it back in the street.
Can't put it in the street. So, I mean, that's perfectly acceptable by code to have that strip of snow there. And it creates a lot of comments and all that kind of stuff about, well, nobody's doing their job and all that kind of stuff. And it's just good to know that information so that we can explain.
Yeah, it's a balancing act. It's basically what it is. But we don't want it, we don't want it to be there forever. So.
Yeah, and you trigger And now I know you trigger more frequently, you could do it more often, but it's 20 grand a shot, that adds up pretty quick.
Yeah, exactly. And we only budget 50,000 a year for that, so we try to, you know, use it a little bit as we can, so.
Only about 2.5 times on average
Yep,
a year.
yep.
Yeah, I remember a couple of years ago, it was about 5 or 6 times you guys did it.
Yep.
And Brian, you mentioned that the first snow event cost $20,000.
For the downtown, the first haul out of the snow event, the whole snow plowing event, that's in our monthly report. I don't have that off the top of my head, but I could pull it up if you want to know.
Okay.
I don't think it's been triggered this year yet, right?
We did it the first
Did it
time.
once?
Yeah.
Okay.
We did it one time.
Yes.
I just have a comment. It's like, I can tell you last year trying to get out of where I live to get out on 22 was horrific to try to drive. And I can tell you this year, you guys are doing such a great job that I have not missed one day of work because the roads have been perfect getting out of Muscatine at 7 o'clock in the morning. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we try to take pride in that and try to do the best we can. And we've gotten better. I guess this is the budget to talk about that. We purchased some new equipment to apply salt brine, which allows us to pre-wet, similar to what the DOT does on the highways. So we have a route now that with that salt brine equipment it's liquid brine that goes in the tank truck. So we apply that on our known slick spots, hills, bridges, things like that. And that helps us a lot. It cuts down the amount of salt usage, but it also allows us to get to those areas and plow it off quicker because it's not bonding to the pavement. We can get it out of there sooner. So that's been a real asset to us. And that was one of the benefits of getting the DOT property is that equipment, the storage for that equipment was there. We got the tanks back from them, and they helped us, show us how to do everything to make that brine, and that's been a huge plus, I think, for us in our snow fight.
Any other questions?
Just one thing I'm aware of, so folks know, I mean, there's been one business owner downtown that's been very generous in getting the sidewalks for everybody. They just take one sweep of equipment down the sidewalks, and some of that's changed a little bit this year, and so that creates a lot of questions too. The answer is the store owners are supposed to each get their properties just like a homeowner, you know. So whether you rent or own it, depends on what your lease is if you rent it, but just good to know.
All right, next item is street cleaning, page 182.
This budget includes, in addition to the operation of the street sweepers, it does include the leaf pickup program as well. The revised estimate is actually under the budget in total by $2,300. There was actually a $9,700 increase in personal services cost, and that was because a new employee in this division carries family health, and the previous employee had single health. There was a decrease of $12,000 in contractual services. That decrease is we have not been using temp service employees for the LEAF program. We discontinued that, so that will be a savings in this budget. Next fiscal year, $5,000 increase. Personal services increased by $17,000. A lot of that is a full year of the family health insurance. Contractual services, again, decreased by $12,000 because of discontinuing using the temp service for the LEAF program. That is the highlight, Brian.
All right, so street cleaning is primarily the street sweepers and the leaf pickup. We have two street sweepers. One is it's on a pickup, or not a pickup, it's on a truck chassis with the box in the back that sucks up underneath and throws it in the box. The other one is a three-wheel with the broom in the front and a hopper in the front, and the two big broom is more of a power broom than it is a vacuum type of equipment. We run those usually starting right after ice is out, picking up all that road salt and sand and grit and stuff from the roads, and we take that back to Public Works, then that gets hauled to the landfill, and they can use it for cover at the landfill. The LEAF program, as Nancy alluded to, is we learned from COVID, one of the good things from COVID is that we didn't want to use temp workers because we didn't want to have people that we didn't know and the trucks with people that we did know, and, you know, so we found out that we could do it without temp workers. So that's been a pretty good cost savings to us. There's a trade-off to that because you can't get as much other work done when you're using your permanent staff, but the permanent staff are much more reliable than the temp workers, and you know, they're there and they get it done quicker. They know what they're doing, and it seems to work out well. This year I had very few complaints, so I think that's a program that everybody seems to love and rely on. So as much as I tried to get rid of it for my staff to be their hero, I know it's not going to go anywhere, so they're going to have to hate me for it still. But we're happy to do it. I'm happy to do it. Maybe they're not, but it gets done, and I think it's a valuable service to the community. Yeah, other than that, I think this one is pretty straightforward. We did go away from sweeping at night downtown because of complaints, so we do miss a lot of areas due to the on-street parking. And that's pretty common in most communities. You know, you can't get rid of all that on-street parking. So we do have to dodge around parked cars, similar to when we snowplow when cars are parked. So we do miss some areas, but for the most part, I think we do a pretty good job of keeping the streets swept. We try to get to everyone at least twice a year. Downtown gets a little bit more attention because it's our downtown business district. So yeah, that's kind of the goal of this budget and this item.
Any questions? All right. Wow. You're doing a good job, Brian.
Thank you, sir.
Next item is engineering operations, page 186.
The revised estimate for this budget is actually $9,500 less in total than the original budget. Personal services costs are $20,600 less due to position vacancies that Brian will address. That decrease is partially offset by a $1,400 increase in commodities and a $9,700 increase in capital outlay. There were 2 vehicles budgeted for this year, and due to the price increase, that's the reason the capital outlay came in over by the $9,700. The budget for next year is $26,700 higher, or excuse me, less than the original FY22 budget. Personal services are $23,300 higher. Commodities increased by $1,600. Contractual services decreased by $4,200, and capital outlay decreased by $47,400. We are budgeting for the authorized positions to be filled. That's, I believe, still a challenge.
My turn. So this is Pat Lynch, our city engineer. I think most of you have met Pat and know Pat. I couldn't be happier to have Pat here. I wish I had 10 Pats. I got one, and I can't get another one. I can't even get a half a Pat anywhere. We've been trying now for almost a year, and it's a tough market for engineers. So we continue to look for that. That's one of the reasons, like Nancy said, our budget's a little bit lower because we have not filled that position. We're going to continue to try to do that, and we'll see where we end up. We have been able to hire some in-house staff from past budgets. So we have a construction inspector now, full-time in engineering, and a right-of-way inspector who's 3/4 time and part of the time out of collection and drainage budget. Those guys need vehicles, which is what was in the budget here, and we can't get the vehicles for supply chain issues. So I just found out today from Mr. Moeller that maybe next year, we'll see. We're trying to find trucks. So they're driving around in old police cars, almost Flintstone style, you know, with the holes in the floorboards and everything else. So we're trying to get them some new stuff. Hopefully that'll show up here soon. But Pat is super busy. He's doing a great job. Multiple projects that are underway and under his supervision. And with that, I'll just let Pat talk. And any questions you have, I'm sure Pat can answer. If not, I can try to answer. Tell him how great you are.
He thinks I'm great.
We all think you're great.
Oh, thanks. I'm here to answer any questions that you have.
Could you tell me, I'm sorry,
Yep, you're fine.
Okay,
Thank
could you explain, I mean, there's a significant increase in the workload in right-of-way permits processed. What's driving that? Well, start with, could you tell me a little bit about what a right-of-way permit is, what it takes to process it, and what's driving such a fourfold increase in it?
Typically, the permit for, the right-of-way permit is any excavation done inside the right-of-way. So your plumber's ditches, your boring, your like cable boring for telecommunications and cable TV and fiber. Anytime they dig in the right-of-way, we want them to pull permits so we know who's digging in our right-of-way.
Yep.
The reason that it increased so much was before nobody was pulling permits. And now that the reason we've got the right-of-way inspector partially out of a collection and drainage budget and partially out of our budget is he's taking on the utility locates along with the permits. So the plumbers and all the contractors were calling in locates, but they weren't pulling a permit. So some of them didn't know they needed to pull a permit, some of them just didn't. So he's catching those now. So when he goes out to do a utility, or gets a utility locate, he checks to make sure they have a permit first.
Okay.
And if they don't have a permit, he calls them up and lets them know that you need to get a permit. So they're actually pulling permits now. So that's one reason why it increased so much. And it varies from year to year. We have a lot of sewer services in this area that are Orangeburg. There's a lot of old lead water services in the area. So when those are discovered, the residents have to improve the condition. They can't have those. They're not allowed by city code. So those are being all addressed at this point too. So
What are the penalties for somebody when they're found not pulling a permit at the right time?
right now we're because we just started enforcing it a couple of years ago. We're not heavy-handed with the penalties at this point, but the right-of-way position does have a citation authority, and I think it's $500 up to $500 per occurrence, I believe.
And what is a typical permit price? I know they're a little different. They're based on
Right,
value.
yeah, right now, it's really confusing, and Andrew Fangman and I are kind of working on revamping it to make it more reasonable and understandable. But an excavation permit in the right-of-way is $20. A curb cut is $110, and a sidewalk permit is $20.
Okay.
So.
And then finally, just kind of a comment, similar to the fire department, I'm always concerned when I see head count going up over the last 10 years and population hasn't, but just like the fire department, your workload as measured by that has gone up fourfold. Your head count's gone up 2 or 3-fold, so that indicates your productivity per head count is actually increasing, and that's
Right.
to be congratulated.
Thank you.
Still don't know what to do about it. Overall, our head count keeps going up, but our population is not growing to support it. So.
Right.
And the workload's going up, so it's not like you're just adding people.
The
No.
right-of-way inspector also, he's also checking on private developments as well. Our inspector, our project management team takes care of all the municipal projects, but there are a number of private projects. Take Scooters, for instance, Scooters Coffee. When one of those comes to town, they do dig inside the right-of-way and work inside the right-of-way, but they also track mud into the right-of-way and do affect the right-of-way as well. So we have the right-of-way inspector cover those as well. And I believe at this time there are 12 to 14 of those projects going on right now. So they covered those as well as all the locates and the right-of-way permits, so.
And to get back to that workload and why it's gone up, it wasn't getting done in the past for multiple reasons, but this is one of the things that Pat and I felt was important. If there's parts of town where you can drive around a street and you'll get a dip like that, right? That's a poorly compacted patch. Now we're inspecting those patches to make sure that they meet city specifications so that we don't have that going around town. So this will make an overall improvement in the rideability of our roads and hopefully the longevity of our roads as well. So it's a pretty important piece of the engineering division, and it's working out pretty well so far. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. And then just to talk about the penalties and stuff, $500 is probably maybe a little steep, but then you want it to be more than actually going and get the permit. You don't want to make it the price of the permit or even less, because then why go get the permit, right?
Yeah, and there's an initiative staff-wide to review our fines and fee schedules, and I believe that's coming up at a future in-depth, but, so we'll be reviewing those and proposing new ones and make sure that it makes sense. Just like the permits, we should be able to streamline those permits too, and so you don't have to get multiple permits to do the same work in the same hole. So we are working on that to try to improve that. It helps the citizens, it helps the contractors, it'll benefit everybody, I think, and hopefully be easier to understand.
Yeah, a lot of cities will have 2 to 3 times, the fine will be 2 to 3 times whatever the permit price would have been, so the fine adjusts to the size of the project as well.
Any other questions?
It's probably more of a comment. I've had the chance, as a few of us this year, attending some of your project meetings, and I got to say, thank you so much for doing that, Pat, and Brian for encouraging that. I mean, I think the communication's critical, and I think it's helpful. You've had, 4 major capital projects and streets alone this year, and you've closed out 2 of them. So, thank you, and I mean, it was always interesting going to the meetings, and you learn a lot. So, and plus we could talk to the residents, so, but thank you and keep that up.
We will. As a matter of fact, just a quick plug here, we are having the Grandview Avenue Phase 2 pre-construction meeting for the public next Thursday at 5 o'clock at the Rose Bowl Bowling Alley. And then we'll be starting the business owner meetings probably a few weeks after that when construction starts. So if anybody's interested in coming to that, and Kevin will post that out as well, but it'll be next week.
And the sewer separation one is when?
Sewer separation is February 17th.
Yeah.
And that'll be here in council chambers.
I just want to point out, on the performance measures, some of the increased, actually city employees, the one is actually kind of replacing the previous contracted project manager inspector positions. And so we budget for that based on allocating, actually on that one, it looks like our goal is, for next year, is charging out 80% of that person's time to the capital projects that they're working on. So that's just, well, it looks like an increase in staffing. It's kind of a shift between contracting and having a city staff person do that work.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, next item is equipment replacement.
195, yeah.
Special revenue, page 1, and it's the handout that, the fund statement that Cinda handed out before the meeting.
No, there's 2 of them. What's the transfer?
The equipment replacement fund funds all of the general fund vehicles and equipment, major vehicles and equipment, except for what's funded from road use taxes. So we transfer money in to the fund, and
I got an extra page, you don't?
starts on page 1 of the special revenue funds. So the chart on page 1 shows our annual transfers for the last 10 years. The last 2 years, we're transferring in $245,000 or $250,000. The maybe easier, the page after the fund statement, it's page 4. Actually lists the various items that were originally in the current year budget, totaled $239,000. Revised estimate is $258,300. Park maintenance truck was actually carried forward from last fiscal year. For next fiscal year, all of the requests were listed. They totaled $622,500, and it's noted which ones are being recommended. And these were intended to be the most critical needs that fit within the budget. So $289,000 in purchases. That includes 2 vehicles for the building department, a building inspector vehicle and a code enforcement vehicle, 3 replacement police Tahoes, replacement of a drug task force vehicle, $35,000, 0-turn mower for the cemetery, and a truck for park maintenance for $30,000. And some of those, when we look at requests from departments, they turn in maintenance records. They say how many miles they have on the vehicles. And the one I'm remembering off the top of my head is the drug task force vehicle has over 200,000 miles on it, type thing. So we've tried to get the most critical needs in the proposed budget. Randy Moeller knows all of these vehicles, so any questions on a specific one, he can probably answer them.
Public Works has the vehicle maintenance shop within it. We maintain, these guys maintain everything except fire trucks and the water pollution control plant vehicles. But they maintain tractors, they maintain pickup trucks, heavy-duty trucks, buses. They keep all that stuff running. Saws, right? Chainsaws, concrete saws, small engines, they do everything. So I'll let Randy talk about any questions that you might have for that. Just know that supply chains, this is the biggest hit that we're having right now with vehicle maintenance stuff. So.
I do have a question.
Okay.
I've been noticing for quite some time now that we have at least 2 Ford Rangers and another vehicle parked in the lot kind of behind the library. What are we going to do with those?
Those are used daily by community development. Those are the inspector's cars. That's where they park them at night.
Okay, but it doesn't seem like whenever I drive by, they're in the same spot
Well,
as they were before.
Don't know what their schedules are. I don't know that every one of them gets used every day, but those cars are all assigned to people.
Okay, thank you.
If I could ask if Randy would talk a little bit about, this year he and Brian worked on a vehicle replacement program, essentially, where they are looking at sort of over years. I don't know if it's a 10-year, forecast of the condition of our current fleet and on what years we'll need to replace various vehicles. And they're doing this to get an idea of on annually, on average, how many vehicles do we need to replace? And they did quite a bit of analysis of the class of the vehicle, the mileage, and the condition. And this is a best practice to do this. And so I just wanted them to speak to it because it was a lot of effort to do it. Yeah.
I'm glad you asked that, because I was about ready to ask, would it be better if we bought one vehicle every year versus buying 3 or 6 or however many vehicles we're buying in 1 year? So it's more spread out like we do with the ambulances and things like that.
I think that's what we're trying to figure out by doing this. This is just something I kind of threw together. It's a list of all of our fleet, and everything is on here from what department it belongs to, how long we've had it, how many miles are on it, how old it is, if there's any issues like frame rust issues is one of our biggest things that we're fighting right now. Trucks are getting older and they're not safe to drive, so we've parked a lot of them in the last several years. And we've done a nice job over the last 2 or 3 years with council approving
the purchase of a lot of vehicles, but we've identified a lot more, you know, that are gonna come forward in the next 2, 3, 4 years. And we wanna eventually get caught up so we can do some of that preventive, you know, we know this vehicle's gonna last for so long. We know we need to start thinking about purchasing it in 2 or 3 years. And we wanna be able to come back to the departments and tell them what kind of condition their vehicles are in, and to let them know that, hey, you need to start thinking about replacing this vehicle sooner than later. In the past, it's kind of been, when it dies, then we worry about it, and we're trying to get away from that. And the guys in the shop are doing a better job of doing more inspections as far as structural things, which are the really big issue right now with most of the vehicles that we're having to replace. They're old, they're 10, 15, some are 20 years old. And we've been fixing them, but now we're gonna get to the point where, you know, we wanna get on a replacement program. We wanna stay ahead of it if we can. And I think that's kind of what we're working on. This is not complete by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a start.
And how many do you have in your fleet? Talk a little bit about how many vehicles you have in our fleet.
I don't know for sure, exact number. 200 or 300? 200, yeah, almost 300.
So I
Vehicles that have license
Yeah.
plates on them that we actually drive. We maintain, you know, salt spreaders, snow plows, all that kind of stuff too, leaf machines, that kind of stuff too, so.
You're lucky.
This is basically just vehicles that are on the road.
Okay.
What we found through this exercise, and this is just going back to 2018-19, which is when we started with our electronic records. In 18-19, we replaced 5 vehicles. 19-20, we did 13. 20-21, we did 7. 21-22, we did 11. We're projecting 12 this year. That comes out to about 12 to 13% of the fleet replacement each year. That's worked. It's working. And what we need to tune this a little bit more and see what that number, you know, if it doesn't need to be higher, or is it too high? We haven't quite got that dialed in yet. And the trouble with that is too, is that a lot of these, you know, we bought a lot of police Tahoes the last few years, so that kind of skews it. We're buying a lot of vehicles, but they're all going to one department. Some departments don't get new vehicles for 5, 10 years, or sometimes more, it just depends. So there's work to be done with this, but we're trying to get an idea of what makes sense, what's that turnaround time. There are industry standards for some of these things. Some fleets, 10 years and it's gone, no matter what condition it's in. Ours, it's been, if it still runs, we're keeping it. And there's pros and cons to that, right? You don't have the capital costs, but you do have the maintenance costs. So we're trying to find that sweet spot, and we'll continue to do that until we get it dialed in. But that's what we've been working on the last 6 months, 9 months, something like that. So please know that we are working on it. Yes.
Councilmember Brockert?
Yes. Do we not have an undercoating program for new vehicles so that we tend to slow down the rust and whatnot that inevitably occurs in the Midwest?
We do. Typically, when we budget for those, we include that in the specs.
Okay.
Sometimes they don't come in as good as we want, so we still put them up on the rack. We still undercoat
Okay.
over top of what they're doing, just to make sure everything is covered. We've been doing that for 6 years, I think, since I've been here. Yeah, and we go back on some of the newer equipment. We went back and actually touched up a few things. You know, we're trying to make them last longer. This new car wash that's coming is going to be a huge benefit, and hopefully we can, you know, stay away from some of these issues that we're having now.
Have we gone back and undercoated vehicles that weren't prior to the current program? When we have to fix them anyway for some other reason, that we run them through and get them undercoated?
There's a lot running around that never had anything on them from when they were new. The problem is we're learning, there's a lot of articles out there you can read about undercoating, but rubberized undercoating's always been the thing that everybody used. Well, now they're finding out when you seal that piece of metal up, that frame up, it's a hollow piece of tube. When you seal it up, it rusts from the inside out. So now they're going to some oil-based things that are supposed to be applied every year. You know, there's a lot of stuff out there that you can try. We're using a product that we buy from a company in New York. Seems to be pretty good stuff. We've had good luck with it. It's easy to touch up. So Yeah, anything we've bought in the last, since I've been there, 7, going on 8 years, has been undercoated.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Gordon?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to make a comment about, like the police Tahoes that we bought. 2 years ago, we sort of talked about this and tried to level out the purchase, so we didn't have like a big purchase of 5, and said like 2 to 3 every year, just to make sure we always had a rotation coming in. So, and hopefully with your new system, you'll be able to start seeing other trends. So I'm guessing with your asset management system or your system you've got in place now, you're doing a work order on every request, so you're tracking the maintenance on every vehicle, every mower and things like that?
Yep, everything that comes in shop gets a work order on it.
Okay, great, and that way you can also purchase some replaceable parts and stuff and have them available?
It's easier to track warranty.
Yeah,
Since May of 2019, I think, is when we implemented PubWorks. Everything is electronic since then.
perfect.
Everything before that is in my files.
And that data is in the spreadsheet too. We can pull up any vehicle you want and tell you how much money we spent on it. So that's one of our benchmarks is, you know, at some point, we're gonna have more invested in this vehicle than it's worth, right? So is that the line that goes away? It depends, right? But that's the variables that we're looking at with this process. So like I said, we're not quite there yet, but we are working towards that.
Oh, no, that's great, and also, like I said, you know, just standard parts that you have to replace. Trying to minimize how many different manufacturers you have, so you can have common parts and have them available. Things like that, just to help having a Kanban available. So, but glad to hear that, thank you.
How old's the drug force task vehicle? If it's, is it 200,000 miles? Is that what was mentioned?
Which one? It's got 180-some thousand. It's a 2009.
Okay, I thought I heard 200,000, sorry.
It's a 717. It's a pickup. It's had a lot of body work done to it, and it's had a lot of work done to it, and right now it's using a lot of oil.
717.
It's not gonna
Okay.
last.
2009.
2009.
2009.
Okay.
Those drug guys are driving it hard, huh?
Of the two,
Randy, go ahead. When we're in a situation of high inflation and supply chain, you know, are you prepared, or are we making sure that we're, have got everything up to the best working order as possible, so that if we have to defer some purchases, you know, for certain economic reasons, that, you know, we're prepared and ready to do that all the time?
We've done a better job of that. I came to Brian a couple of years ago, and we talked about, there's a lot of things that come through the shop that in the past have, well, I don't have any money left in my budget, let's just worry about it later and we'll fix it later. We've decided if it's a safety issue, if it's something that needs to be fixed to keep the vehicle on the road, we're gonna fix it, and we'll have to figure out where the money's coming from. So we're not gonna lower our standards based on that, but we are, you know, we're not throwing away good parts. We're making sure that things need to be replaced when we replace them. You know, parts are crazy expensive right now and hard to find. Like Brian said earlier, you know, there's several parts stores in town. We used to be able to get stuff same day, next day. We're waiting a week sometimes. We just waited a couple of months for a transmission for one of our police Tahoes. Those are really hard to find right now. So it's ever changing. Every day there's something new.
Can I,
To piggyback on that, I would say, we don't, our staff, Randy's staff, our mechanics are not comfortable putting people in a vehicle that's dangerous. Some of these vehicles have had exhaust leaks right into the cab, or bad brakes, or bad tires, or bad everything. So we park those vehicles. So we do have quite a number of vehicles that are parked right now. So I'd say, to answer your question, honestly, John, we're at the point where we don't really have many spare vehicles right now, because, I mean, we have vehicles and we could make them roadworthy, but at what expense, right? The cost benefit isn't there. So we're doing a fine line right now with what we've got and what we can give out. So if somebody had a vehicle breakdown and needed a loaner, we're scraping bottom right now with that. And it's more about the supply chain, because we've got several that are ordered that we just can't get. I think when we get caught up, we won't have that issue. So we're trying to be careful and prolong the life of these as best we can right now.
Elaborate on that. Brian said we have a lot on order. We have 10 new vehicles on order right now with the city. And I was informed yesterday that 3 of them aren't going to be produced. So I don't know what we're gonna do with those yet. We have to figure out how we're gonna buy those vehicles if we can't
What
get
kind of vehicles aren't being produced?
Chevys.
Chevys?
They've shut down the truck factory.
Mostly
Really?
Corvettes.
Really?
We had
No
four of
chips?
a certain truck ordered, and we're getting one out of the four.
So that leads me to the question I want to ask. Sorry, you just like fed right into what I was going to ask. Do we need all these trucks? Do we, and I don't mean as far as transport, I get that. Can we go to a car versus having trucks? I mean, the cost of a car is cheaper than a truck most of the time.
Sometimes,
I mean, I realize sometimes you need a truck because you have
yeah,
things that you have to.
I would say for the most part, with the work that gets done with these vehicles, it should be a truck. What we may want to look at is maybe used or a couple years used, right? Nothing used up, but something that's an older model just because we can't get the new models. So some of the vehicles, like for the engineering inspectors, they're not driving like police officers, right? They're not driving these cars 1,000 miles a week. They're driving these cars maybe 100 miles a week. So that we might be able to get a used truck in there and make that last long enough until supply chain gets caught up. So we're trying to be creative with that. I talked to Randy this morning. He came in and said, hey, great news, we can't get the trucks we ordered. So the thought is maybe we need to go out and rebid it. If we can't get a Chevy, maybe we need to go look at a Ford or a Dodge. Or like we did with the snowplow truck, find one on the ground somewhere between Des Moines and Chicago. Maybe we can just go send two guys, we can purchase one and send guys to pick it up. So that's changing our thought process and not our purchasing process, because we have rules for that, but that's some of the things we might have to look at to try to get some of these filled, I think. And so we're trying to be creative, and we're going to continue to look. But yeah, it's new things like that, we can't get them because they're not being made. So I have the same problem with buses, and we'll talk about that Saturday with Amy, is that we've ordered 2 brand new buses, they haven't even built the chassis yet. And that, we ordered them a year ago. So,
And Angie, to elaborate a little bit on what you asked, we do like building and zoning. The vehicles that are in the budget are cars, basically. They're not trucks. One of the trucks is for Parks Department. They pull trailers and stuff.
Sure.
One is for the transfer station. They pull a trailer out to the landfill occasionally, hauling equipment out there. And most times they're needed. Trucks are definitely needed, but when they're not, we're looking at cars.
I just know over the
Department
last
has a few.
the last 2 years when I've come to council to listen to what's going on, it's like truck, you know. So I just want to make sure, you know, is there a possibility that, you know, we could go to a different vehicle, like a Murano, where it's like a little bit bigger, where you could still put stuff in the back and,
Unfortunately, most of our departments, work everywhere within the city, and they have
Sure.
to haul stuff there, so
okay.
they're used.
Thanks for asking or answering my question.
one of the things too that we're probably becoming in the near, if not next 5 years, will be either hybrids or electric. They don't have many of those trucks, but there are some type of, hybrid SUVs out there, and those are available. They're building those. So that might be an option that we would look at as well. So like you said, some of those things that maybe you don't need a pickup, but you can get like a crossover SUV with a hatchback that's a hybrid. Those are available easier than, a full gas engine. So we're going to get creative and try to get these vehicles supplied. It's just right now, we're just stuck like everybody else is.
So you're the gentleman that takes care of the Batmobile then, right? Maintaining that?
Well, okay, yeah.
That's a secret.
I can't tell you.
Is there any other questions?
Randy, I don't know if you want to review for the new council members how the state bids on vehicles used to work. I'm not sure if we still have state bids available or not.
Yeah, I can. So the state of Iowa has a vehicle purchasing contract. Every year, I think it's in August, they send out specs that anybody can write. We can write specs for a vehicle that we want. If we want a specific pickup with specific things in it, we can write the specs, send it into the state, and they will send those specs out to any dealer that wants to bid. And then they award a contract based on the low bidder. And then we kind of use this as a reference. This is what we kind of budget off of, these numbers that are awarded to these dealers for what the vehicles cost. Unfortunately, this year, the red on this sheet is everything that's not available. Like, everything. There's nothing available. So there basically is no state contract this year. there will be, like Brian said, the hybrid cars are available, and maybe for the 2 community development cars that are on here, we might look at something like that. But, yeah.
Right now, the hybrid cars are more expensive than a regular car too. That's part of the problem. So I think you told me there was like a minivan. There's 2 different minivans. One's a gas engine. It's like, let's just say 30,000, and the hybrid's like 60,000. So, you know, economically, we can't really do that either, but we'll see what happens.
We could look at, though, partnering with MPW on that, because if we could get a charging station, then they would pay for the costs of the fuel, and we wouldn't need to fuel the vehicle. So there's a potential partnership there.
Is there, with the hybrids though, they probably aren't I mean, I have a hybrid car that runs battery and gas, and I don't plug mine in. It just recharges via the,
Yeah, they do make plug-in hybrids too, yeah. But that's true.
So this is more along Angie's idea, and I hesitate to bring it up because 2 years ago I'd have never thought about doing this, but I spent the last 2 years looking for a truck, same issues. Anyway, I ended up buying a trailer for our minivan, and I was actually surprised for the last 2 years at how handy that was. It had some pluses even that, you know, you don't have to lift it up so high to get it up into the back of the truck, stuff like that. Downside is minivan's kind of limited, you know, a high capacity towing minivan is limited about 3,500 pounds, you know, so again, just an idea out there. I mean, I never would have considered it a couple of years ago, but after living it, it's been, it is actually really, really good, and I'm really glad I found a truck though.
And just one more thing that comes to my mind, a lot of these vehicles that we have on order currently are replacing retired police officer cars. And I don't think there's gonna be any of those anymore. I mean, the ones that we're rotating out are pretty much wore out. We're not gonna be able to recycle those like we have in the past. So that's kind of what, those are the ones we're trying to really focus on, getting rid of those old wore out cars.
Carol?
I wanted to highlight the replacement program because I want council to know that when we bring vehicles to council for approval to purchase, that's backed by a lot of data and information and a process. It's not just random. And so, you know, I hope council has confidence that we are using a data-driven approach when it comes to vehicle replacement.
Any other questions? All right, we're going to flip the page, and we're going to go into equipment services, and that's page 1 in other funds. Nancy?
And this is Randy Muller's operation too. This is an internal service fund, which is an enterprise fund basically supported by users, but the users are other city departments. So the other city departments are the customers that bring their vehicles to the equipment services operation for maintenance, as well as fuel. So the fuel, gasoline, diesel, and all the maintenance for most city departments are done through the city garage equipment services operation. So a lot of what's in the budget, his budget is pass-through things. So he purchases fuel that is then charged out to departments with a fuel surcharge. Also, parts, same thing, it's charged out to departments. He does buy some parts to keep in stock, and some are specific for specific repairs. Outside service, if something has to be taken out to something for work, it's paid for by this fund and then charged out to departments. And that charge out is done once a month. So in this case, we do have a budget for Randy. The revised estimate expenditures are $10,900 more than the original budget. $7,900 increase in personal services. That's primarily due to retirement pay for one of the mechanics. Small $800 increase in commodities, $300 increase in contractual services, and $1,900 increase in capital outlay. The FY23 budget, $6,500 higher than the current year budget. It's a 9,700 increase in personal services, 800 increase in commodities, 500 increase in contractual, and a $5,100 decrease in capital outlay, and a small increase in transfers. We did buy a new vehicle lift last fiscal year, and we have an internal loan that's repaying that over, I think there was a down payment, it'll be 4 years. So that hits, just the annual payment hits this budget until that internal loan is repaid. We are, and the mechanics do keep track of their hours, and those are charged to the various vehicle repairs. So as the wages increase, we do periodically increase the labor rate charged out to departments. We're proposing a $2 per hour increase in that charge out rate in the FY23 budget. Randy and Brian?
This is where I kind of hit this before, but Randy's staff, 3, we actually just hired a new mechanic on Monday. We had one retire. They repair over almost 300 pieces of equipment a year. They maintain them every year. That's how many we have. They do about, I think it's like almost 300, 200 work orders a month. So there's always something to be worked on. The shop's never not busy. It's never quiet. You know, there's always stuff going on out there. And for the most part, these guys do a great job. And so we're happy to have them. And it helps to keep our costs down. One thing I think Randy will talk about is the vehicles these days are almost like spaceships, right? So a lot of the stuff we're getting to the point where they're good, but they don't have the new stuff to take. So some of the stuff has to go out to get serviced. And some of the big stuff is more complicated than we're able to do in our shop. But for the most part, they get first shot at diagnostics, and then they decide from there whether or not they can work on it and get it done in a timely fashion or not. So anything else you want to add? Or?
Well, like Brian said, some of this new stuff requires new tools, new technology. We've been fortunate over the last several years, you know, council's allowed us to buy some scan tools, and I think we're up to 4 different scan tools now. We've got a software program that's online that we got last year that was approved, that we can go in and help with diagnosis, so we can get schematics, we can get blueprints, we can get things like that. There's a chat page there where you can put a problem that you're having, you can't figure it out, and somebody will answer, hey, I've run into that before, look at this, this, and this. That's helped a lot. That's kept a lot of work inside the shop. Rarely do we take anything to a dealership anymore unless it's a warranty. I mean, we've got a couple of guys that are pretty good on this new stuff, and we'll continue to look at new technology if we can get it to help us. But right now, I think we're sitting pretty good. We've come a long way in the last 5 years, I will say that, for as far as keeping stuff in-house and not sending it out. When it comes to the bigger trucks and stuff, some of that stuff is dealer priority only. We can scan it, we can figure out what's wrong with it, but we can't do anything with it. They're all computer controlled, everything's got a module, everything has a wire instead of cables. I mean, it's all electronic, and it's confusing. It's tough, but my guys do a really good job about learning on the fly, and we have a lot of resources that we can use, so that helps.
Any questions? All right. We're going to head to collection and drainage. This is in the enterprise fund, page 14.
The collection and drainage budget is basically the storm and sanitary sewer collection system and some drainage issues around the community. There's some background information on page 14. We've got information on the consent order for the required sewer separation for the West Hill area. That's included in this section of the budget. The cost of that will be part of the capital projects we look at next Tuesday night. For the operating budget, the revised estimate is under the original budget by $28,100. Personal services are 61,000 less than the original budget. It was almost this time last year, there was a reorganization done before the solid waste manager was also charged partially to this budget, and that's since been changed. We've got a sewer maintenance supervisor now. The collection and drainage lead worker position was eliminated. And so that accounts for why the personnel services are actually less than what was budgeted. Contractual services is under by 3,800. Capital outlay is over by 1,700. And transfers increased by 35,000. The increase in the transfers, and this has to do with capital projects too, we're funding the engineering part of the the Lake Park watershed study from the collection and drainage budget. So the 35,000 hits this fiscal year for the engineering, and the actual project is budgeted as a transfer out in FY23. So with the FY23 budget, it's actually an increase of 406,900 higher, but of that, 305,000 is for the Lake Park watershed improvements. There was 39,000 decrease in personal services, and again, that compares to the previous staffing organization. 137,000 increase in capital outlay, and the increase in transfers. The capital outlay, and staff could go through this in more detail, includes 100,000 for sewer lining, 15,000 for manhole lining, 75,000 for phase 1 of a sewer inflow and infiltration study, and an allowance for various smaller sewer maintenance projects at 50,000. The budget, collection and drainage budget does include and has included 200,000 annual transfers to the West Hill Sewer Separation Project. There's a 350,000 annual transfer to the Sewer Extension Reserve, and then some administrative transfers as well. The collection and drainage budget is funded by a separate collection and drainage fund fee that's on everyone's monthly bill, and it's a separate, laid out separately on your power and water bill. There's your regular sewer fee, and then there's a collection and drainage fee. The collection and drainage fee this fiscal year is $13.15 per month, and it will go up to $13.40 for FY23. And FY23 is the last year of the previous 5-year rate study, as we will be contracting for another rate study to review those, both the sewer and the collection and drainage fees.
So the collection and drainage division of Public Works, or as I like to call them, the sewer guys, they take care of stuff nobody else wants to take care of, right? Zach Etzel is our new supervisor. He was promoted about March last year, so this is his first budget he's got to work on, first budget meeting he's got to work on. I should make him do all the talking probably, right? But Zach's doing a great job. He's one of my up-and-coming young leaders. He's got a staff of 4 that run the camera truck, run the jetting thing. They keep all your catch basins open from leaves and stuff. They take care of backups. On our main, they visit a lot of homes if there's a backup, and we try to help those people out. And so they do a great job, I think. We get very few complaints. We get a lot of work done. Our system is broken into zones, and they do a zone a year, televising to make sure, more like preventative maintenance, to make sure that everything's flowing the way it should. This year we did request some funds for a lining program. This is kind of Zach's baby, but we have a lot of old pipe in town, as you can imagine, in a town this age. Some of it, the outside's good, the inside's bad, and a lot of these things you can put in a liner in there, and you basically have a brand new pipe inside of an old pipe. So that's a technology that we're looking to use this year and try to get some money to do that. So if this is approved, we'll be able to line out a few hundred maybe or so feet of sewer, maybe a little bit more. And that goes hand in hand with the inflow and infiltration study, which is usually I&I, which what that's short for is water that's not supposed to be in there. So you're either getting groundwater or stormwater in your sanitary sewer, or vice versa, you're getting it into your storms, you're getting sanitary into your storm sewer. So we know that we have these areas around town because when it rains hard, you'll get a sewer backup, right? And that shouldn't be happening. So what we're trying to do is to allocate some funds to hire a consultant to go and do some testing for us to find out where these areas might be. And then when we know where the inflow is coming into our pipes, then we can line those pipes or line those manholes with this program funding and stop that. That'll in turn increase our sanitary sewer capacity so that we don't have backups, right? And hopefully it's going where it's supposed to go into the storm sewer. So that's just a couple of highlights. I'm talking too much. I'll let Zach talk, and if you have any questions, he'd be happy to answer those as well.
Basically, with the sewer lining, I broke it down to where sewer lining will cost you anywhere from $30-ish to $40-ish a foot. And to go and replace a lot of these lines that are in town that have been in the ground over 100 years, currently on West Hill, we're paying almost $500 a foot. So there's a very large cost savings in being able to line this stuff and use the old pipes that are currently in the ground. And with the manhole lining, if we can do that, that is $100 a foot versus like $2,500 a foot to replace. So there's a large cost savings in being able to line the infrastructure that's already there rather than replacing. And with the sewer study, it will give me a good idea of what really needs to be done now. And I'm not going in blind and saying, well, I think this area needs it, but in return, actually this area needs it a lot more. So I want to make sure that the money's getting spent where it needs to be spent versus not.
Zach, I have one question for you. How are you going to determine what, I know you said you're going to have a study that determines where that lining would go, and you just got done talking about how houses and sewer lines are over 100 years old. Mm-hmm. To me, it's like if it's 100 years old, I live in a house that's 108 years old. I'm dreading when you guys do Fullium because I've got this feeling that my tubing coming from my property out to the, I think it's, when that happens, it's going to crush it, and I'm going to have to do some work on that. So how are you determining, are we just taping the 100-year-old tubes, or are we going to replace those? Or is there, if somebody's got 50-year-old tubing, it's okay to do it with that. I guess I just don't want to put a Band-Aid over something that actually needs to be repaired.
So the sewer lining actually has a 50-year life.
Okay.
So in essence, yes, it's a Band-Aid, but it's a very good Band-Aid. Mm-hmm. It increases the structural integrity of the pipe and basically creates almost a new one. Like I said, a 50-year lifespan is really good. The stuff as far as like the stuff going to the homes, a lot of the sewer separation, when they go through, they replace a lot of the stuff that's in the right-of-way. But as far as being concerned on stuff getting crushed that's private, that stuff's all taken care of when the sewer separation goes through.
Thank you.
How thick is the lining?
It all depends. So I believe the line that was just lined right now is about a 1/4 inch thick.
Okay. Any, I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you talk about the area of a circle and all that stuff, what are the capacity restrictions, any issues? I mean, is any study going on how much capacity we're reducing by adding that lining?
I'm not 100% sure, but with the lining, anything that's 6 inches or smaller would not get lined.
Okay.
Because it's, at that point, the city's equipment is too large for that size of pipe.
Yeah, it'd be a higher reduction of that than it would be
Correct.
a larger 10-inch
Correct.
line or something like that. And it's a one and done, right? You don't go reline something else twice or anything else?
No,
Okay.
it's one shot, and the various consultants that are out there, what we would do is, we would send out a request for proposals. They have their own staff engineers that will, we tell them what size pipe it is, what the length is, they can calculate all that for us and let us know. And then our engineer can evaluate that and say, okay, this is not gonna affect our flow, this is not gonna affect our drainage, whatever. So that engineering is done by formula by the proprietary companies. They have different types of material. Some is like if you imagine like taking a fire hose and unrolling it down a pipe, and then they use hot water and expands and it creates a new pipe around the old pipe. That's one technology. Some of them are sprayed. There's different, and they're all proprietary, so there are different ways to do it. The one that we did off of Shamrock Drive, I believe it's kind of like almost a sock that you pull through it, and then you add hot water to it, and it like cures it in place. There's different techniques for that, but they all have. You're right. The original pipe inside diameter gets smaller because you're putting something inside of there, but the coefficient of friction is different. You're taking the sags out of the pipe, you're taking the cracks out of the pipe, so the benefits outweigh that type of stuff, and it's all calculated.
Okay, and then just one last question out of curiosity. Is it considered maintenance or capital expense?
Well, this would be, how do we put that in there, Nancy? Is this,
We generally budget new items like this as capital, just so it's not kind of buried in line items. And with this high dollar amount, we'll probably continue budgeting this as capital. And I think this is intended to be one zone, and then you move on future years to other zones, is that right?
that's our thought process right now. We're gonna have to see how much I&I we have, and then how much lining needs to happen. I mean, this $100,000 is a lot of money, but it might not even scratch the surface. So we're not quite sure where we are yet, but we wanted to be able to try it, to test it, and see what we get. So that's kind of what we're doing here. It's more of a trial process right now. As we go through town and as we wrap up some of our larger cost projects like West Hill sewer separation, we would still have funds then available that in future years we could add, maybe expand this program, and instead of doing 100,000, maybe we do $500,000 or something like that to try to prolong the life of some of these pipes. So we're going to see what we find out.
Zach, I had a question for you. How's the integrity of Papoose Creek, like the stormwater that comes through there? Do you guys inspect that like a yearly basis or just kind of as needed?
Yeah, so typically after a major flood event, we'll go in and look at it. Other than that, it's on basically a yearly, we'll look at it. I was just in there and inspected the railroad bridge just a couple months ago with the railroad. Everything looks fine. The integrity of the tunnel is still pretty good.
Yeah, it's just amazing how large that tunnel is. I think it was like 2019. We all got to know each other pretty well.
That's correct.
It was like 19 feet tall and 25 feet wide. That's
Correct. Downtown here, it's very large. It gets smaller once you get up towards the hospital where it enters the tunnel, but it's still up there, I believe, if I remember correctly. It's like a 9x9 box tunnel where it starts.
They used to drive a Jeep down it all the time.
Correct.
That's cool.
This is a little off topic, but I think when we get the sanitary sewer separated from Papoose Creek, we could make that a lighted kayak tunnel and take it down to the river. That could be a really cool amenity for the community.
Let's not give any ideas, because people do that with.
It's gated off right now. You can't get in there.
They did that in San Antonio, and it was
All
quite the
kinds of
attraction.
critters in there.
That bass.
In fact, so they did that in San Antonio, Texas, and it was a pretty good attraction, and a building similar to yours, bar in the basement, kayaks pull up.
I'm not that crazy.
That's a good idea. This is great.
I did that in San Antonio.
Very good. Any other questions for this group? And I believe that's the last item. Is that correct? All right. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Great job, Zach. Councilmember Lewis, anything to share tonight?
Nothing for me. Thank you.
Councilmember Hopkins? Nothing, sir. Councilmember Gordon?
Nothing, thank you.
Councilmember Freilich?
No, sir, nothing tonight.
Councilmember Brockert?
Nothing tonight.
Councilmember Gendrich?
Yes. Make sure you attend the cake auction Friday night out at the high school.
There you go.
Girls' game starts at 6 o'clock, I think. Cake and ice cream, booster club, terrific event. Boys' game, varsity to follow. Wonderful community event.
What time is that, John? Do you know?
Well, I think the girls' game starts at 6. They'll be selling cake and ice cream, I'm sure, before. And the boys' game is scheduled for 7:30. Big auctions, cake auctions, featuring athletes and high school students parading the cakes around the gym court. Halftime of the girls' game, in between the two games, halftime of the boys' game. Been several years since I've been out, but I'm going. And because of budget constrictions, I have no intention of buying anybody a piece of cake or any ice cream.
Oh,
But I'd be glad to talk to you and be jovial and happy and all that stuff.
Thank you. Councilmember Osborne?
Okay.
As we look forward to, I know feels like we're a long ways away from it, but as we look forward to the end of next week, wrapping this up and looking at the realities of potentially raising taxes, I know there's offsets and all that. I like the two charts. Either one will do, but model what does our current proposal compare to other regional areas like Iowa City, Quad Cities, a side-by-side comparison of, I kind of like the chart on 11 maybe a little better because it's just actual dollars rather than getting lost in the world of percentages and all that stuff. But and I'm talking about the overview that you presented at the beginning, the PowerPoint, very first thing presented, page 11. It starts out with $75,000 property value, and then it incrementally goes up to $150,000. And I'd like to see side-by-side comparisons of what does that look like in Iowa City, Quad Cities. You can combine those together if you like, or separate them out.
What we already kind of have, and it's in the last year's printed budget, is more our comparable cities. So it's, and I can point out the page number to you or have it. But again, it's last year's data.
Yeah, I remember
People
that.
have not set out their new tax rates yet.
I remember
So
that.
it's like Mason City, Marshalltown,
Yeah.
Ottumwa.
And I think there's value in that, except that, I mean, at the end of the day, we're marketing our city. If I have a job around here, I'm not gonna live in Marshalltown or Mason City. And I understand why that was done that way last year, but I'm specifically requesting, our housing market, looking forward to our housing market that's coming up this year, and I think it'd be helpful data on, these are the choices that folks look at when they choose a community, is what's it cost to live there. And like I said, if I'm looking at somewhere around southeastern Iowa, I'm not gonna look at Mason City,
that's an interesting request, Jeff, especially if you look at Davenport, because you've got Bettendorf and Davenport side by side, and they're going to be immensely different.
Yep.
But you've just asked something that, we usually benchmark like communities.
Yeah, and I actually think, in a similar way,
So are you
I
asking
don't
for
wanna pick out
Bettendorf or
various
Davenport?
communities in
Because
Muscatine, but we have
they're,
that dichotomy going on in Muscatine as well,
Yeah.
there's side-by-side communities that, feel a little apples to oranges, but, because I struggle raising taxes if we're already over what's available in the community. And right now, I don't know. I've tried to put those numbers for myself together. It's not easy. I'm not expecting it to happen overnight, but for the end of next week, it'd probably be a nice time to have that information.
And we can put something together. The schedules that are in the budget with the comparable cities, it does have taxable valuations and tax rates, and those directly correlate.
Yes.
So the higher taxable valuations, they can have a lower tax
Yeah.
rate. So everything is tied together, and not all cities provide the same services.
Yep, I
So
understand.
we can put some things together, but it's not gonna cover all the reasons and the issues, but,
Very
as,
high, very high level. Don't, I'm not looking to get bogged down in,
and the newer communities can have higher new home values, and then can have a lower rate because they don't have as much older infrastructure. So there's a lot of things that tie into the tax rate. The tax base is one of the key things.
I understand, it's not an easy task.
Cinda, anything tonight?
Nothing tonight.
Carol?
I think we can get you what you're asking for and compare apples to apples and still answer your question. I do. Nancy and I will talk about it, but I think we can get you what you need.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yep. I just wanted to mention, tomorrow night, we will have the outside agencies that will be coming in from 5:30 to 7:30. No,
6:30?
it might be 7:30. 5:30 to 7, and then we will be having a regular council meeting after that. So I just want to remind that we'll have two meetings tomorrow. Yep. And dinner before.
And will there be a break between the two meetings?
We'll
we-
accommodate a short break.
I don't want to sit
We're
here
going
for
straight
4
through.
hours.
We'll do our best.
Thank you.
And the only thing I want to say is basically there's a ribbon cutting this Friday at Scooters and coffee, which is amazing. So that's at 11 o'clock. Scooters on the corner of Mulberry and 61. And I will take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Move.